বৰঠাকুৰ IS একাডেমি প্ৰস্তুতি আৰু অধ্যয়নৰ নিৰ্ভৰযোগ্য ঠিকনা।
This is Funny. Welcome to Bordhakur IAS Academy. This is our daily Hindu analysis class for 23rd September 2021. The first article for today is sea level rise is certain. So this article talks about irrespective of what we do as a human race, however we control or however much we control our greenhouse gas emissions, the sequestration of carbon, irrespective of what we do in the near term future, the levels of oceans are going to rise, right? What was the eye-opening report that came out recently that kind of put this issue at the center of discussion in terms of climate change, net zero emissions, or nationally determined contributions, whatever it is, whichever the mitigation technologies or mitigation procedures or rules that various states across the world adopted. At this point of time, the damage that us humans collectively did to the environment means that irrespective of what we do in the next coming few years, whatever the steps we take, the oceans are going to rise. So this is going to have a huge impact on India. India has a coastline of around 7,516.6 kilometers to be very specific, not around, to be very specific, give or take. And India is going to experience the highest brunt of oceans rising. You have sensitive areas like Australia, you have Caribbean islands and small island nations that are more prone to getting submerged under ocean, but nonetheless India, with its economic activity, with its huge coastline, is going to be one of the victims of rise in sea levels. And that report, what is that report? Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC assessment report that talked about climate change in specific. This report was significant compared to other reports because of the sheer amount of data that was used to conclude or come to the conclusions in that report. Makes it that special, makes it that important, that significant. Now, we discussed about that report, but not in detail, but we went over the basics of it, what the conclusion was and how they arrived at it. But nonetheless, that report talked about something else, that is about the sea level rise in the world, irrespective of what we do. That was the conclusion that was also arrived upon, but we didn't discuss at that point of time. Now, the report came out and it kind of set the tone for the COP26 that is going to take place. It set the tone for the push from the world powers against climate control, climate change. And also we saw various articles that we discussed where certain nations were asking India to commit itself for net zero emissions. But again, India is not yet committal on that fact. But nonetheless, we have set ourselves our own targets in that regard, and to be very clear, we are achieving those targets. Later on, we'll discuss about the pollution levels also, but for now, let us understand what the report talks about. Now, the report came out with 5 different socio-economic scenarios for the future where the levels of greenhouse gas emissions are different. So it came out, it used statistical modeling, it used past data, it used standardized data, and it predicted possible different scenarios, socio-economic pathways for future with varying levels of greenhouse gas emissions. So what are those scenarios that this report talks about? Number 1, very low and low greenhouse gas emissions, right? Where the world collectively came together and successfully was able to decline the overall amount of greenhouse emissions. Not only that, the amount of carbon that was being taken out of the ecosystem was also equal to the amount of emissions that were generating. That is the net zero effect, where you, let us say you emit 100 kgs of carbon into the environment on a day-to-day basis. You have technologies, you have carbon sequestration plants, you have forest area, forest cover that can take out, that can absorb 100 kgs of carbon from the environment in a day. So you get to that net zero effect. We discussed about it, this net zero effect, where the amount of carbon being generated on a day-to-day basis is being absorbed equally by the environment itself through emission controlling methods or through forests or carbon capturing plants, whatever it is, but that is what a net zero effect is. So that is one scenario. You have very low greenhouse gas emissions and your emissions have declined to such an extent where you are seeing net zero status in the environment, right? And that too at the or after the middle of century, right? After that your emissions are negative. Actually you are generating less emissions than what the environment is absorbing from the ecosystem. So that is where the one scenario lies. Till mid-century or beyond that, to certain extent beyond that, you are able to achieve net zero emissions, right? Beyond that, middle of the century, you are in negative zone. Your emissions are actually negative. So that is one scenario. The second scenario is intermediate greenhouse gas emissions, right? Not acceptable, not okay, but nonetheless compared to 2005 levels or 2000 levels, the emissions are acceptable in under limit, right? But nonetheless the effect gets magnified. Nonetheless, compared to the previous levels, these levels are okay, acceptable. The third scenario is the worst case scenario. You have high and very high emission rates, right, where they actually, instead of reducing, get doubled than the current levels by 2100 and 2050 respectively. So it has a 50-year half a century doubling standard. So by 2050 you say you have 100 your emission is at one level. By 2050 it gets doubled. By 2100 again it gets doubled. So this is the worst case scenario. So these are the possible three scenarios where the report arrived at. So at this point we established what India is under threat from, right? If the sea levels rise, the coastline, the people that are living on the coastline, the economy, the environment, everything goes under water. That is not only the case with India. Close to 700 million people, it is an estimated 700 million people worldwide live along the coast, and there are plans in place where they intend to expand coastal cities. See, this is where we talked about how India must prepare itself for climate change, where we must incorporate climate change as a potential element in our future planning. That is how you build climate resilient infrastructure. So, on contrary to that, where we need to prepare ourselves for potential climate change or potential fallout of climate change by building climate resilient infrastructure and trying to take away or move people away from coastlines, right? But instead of that, we are seeing expansion of coastal cities, where we are seeing year on year coastal cities getting expanded, investments being made, and there is no end in sight for that. They know that there are certain risks with increase in sea level, but nonetheless the investment in coastal cities has gone up significantly. Now when you look at the three scenarios that we talked about, so the first case scenario is the best case scenario. By mid-century, our emissions are going to get in negative numbers. The second best scenario is the intermediate scenario. But even with that, right, the average warming of the globe or the average warming of the earth will exceed 2 degrees centigrade near the mid-century, not even past the mid-century, near the mid-century. So even in the okay case, not even the best case, not in the worst case, intermediate scenario, with the current rate of projection, with the current rate of emissions, the 2-degree mark that we ourselves set during the Paris Agreement, we are going to exceed that temperature, right? So here is the catch. So let us say in the first case scenario we were able to achieve the negative emission number, but the problem is, despite achieving the best case scenario, the levels of the sea or the oceans are going to rise. The sea level rise will continue even after emissions no longer increase. Why is that? It is a simple reason that it is for the simple reason oceans respond slowly to warming. So you say we are going to cut our emissions, let us say by 60%. So immediately you are not going to see that reflecting on the sea levels, because you have already done the damage in the past, and it is the nature of the global oceans, right? Oceans tend to respond slowly to warming. Now, what is the main reason for expansion and contraction of ocean waters? Temperature, right? They rise, warm ocean waters tend to rise. In addition to that, you add melting glaciers from the land and from the sea. Sea is from Arctic Circle. From lands, you have glaciers, where we talked about what are the disadvantages of ice caps melting in the Himalayan region. What would be the worst case scenario? You have the entire delta plains lying below Himalayas getting flooded. That was the worst case scenario that we discussed in earlier classes, right? So that is also one contributing factor to rise in ocean levels. You have ice caps that are melting, you have glaciers that are melting, and at the end of the day, where that fresh water ends up, it ends up in the ocean. What are the two disadvantages of it? Three disadvantages. One, it is going to flood the floodplains lying under the ice caps. Two, it is going to decrease the salinity of water, which is again devastating. The third, the sea level is going to rise. So you have ice sheets that are melting in Greenland. You are seeing cracks in the ice sheets of Antarctica, Arctica, which we never anticipated, which our projections didn't show. Now this is happening due to this generally in nature happens due to thermal expansion. But what is happening in reality is, due to global warming, this phenomena of thermal expansion is getting magnified. That is why we are seeing a large percent of ice caps, ice sheets either breaking away or completely disappearing in front of our own eyes. Now again, this phenomena is okay. Let us say there is a natural phenomena happens, but we are magnifying it with our human actions. Now, as I said, our models, whatever the forecast models that we are using for either the glacier melt or the ice cap melts or whatever it is, though they got better, there are shortcomings in them. So 10 years ago, if you have asked scientists who were observing the Arctic region and the Antarctic region, they would have given an estimate stating that these ice caps, these glaciers or ice sheets would last for, let us say, 50 or 60 years. But if you ask the same scientists now, they would have said that our estimate was wrong. We were way off in our estimate. One of the biggest example is the Larsen ice shelf. They estimated that it would last for, let us say, 40 or 50 years, but what happened was recently one of the biggest chunks that ever broke away from that Larsen ice sheet broke off recently. I think you would have seen in the news. I think it happened in the last year. So again, whatever the prediction models that scientists are using, they are adequate, but nonetheless they are not accurate, because though they have improved over the years, there are certain shortcomings in them. So these shortcomings are the challenge for us to brace, because they can be trusted, but they don't give us the entire picture. So these are the multiple factors that are at play here. So when you consider the ocean ice interactions, again these interactions kind of tend to cause rapid sea level rise. Now we have one more report called the UN Environment Program Emissions Gap Report, where they pointed out to the harsh reality, that the temperature rise is going to be above 3 degrees centigrade in this century. See, this goes against the goal of 2 degree in the Paris Agreement, where we agreed that we are not going to let the temperature rise or go beyond 2 degrees centigrade in this century. But this report kind of suggests that we are not heading at 2 degree. We have shot past that 2 degree, and it will rise well above 3 degrees centigrade. What does that temperature mean? It means that, right, you have more ice caps melting, you have increase in sea level, again, which will have longer impact, because as I said, the oceans tend to respond slowly. So it would be an incremental increase in sea level around the globe. Now the Indian scenario is stark. Indian scenario is the worst, right? Because let us relegate ourselves to India, then we'll discuss other countries if time permits. But communities along the coast in India are vulnerable to sea level rise. So we are going to see coastal communities taking a big hit in this regard. Major cities that lie on the coastline are going to experience the fallout from this. So what is the best thing that India at this point of can do? Adaptation to sea level rise. You take your losses now itself and you prepare for the future. That is what adaptation, not adoption, adaptation rests upon. Now what is that? We must include a range of measures, right? You need climate resilient, you need coastal walls, you need cities being built a little far away from coastline, critical infrastructure being built far away from coastline, updating our coastal regulation, right? Not allowing large scale constructions taking place in coastal regulation zones, which go against climate and environment, right? Improving your mangrove forest, actually increasing your coverage of mangrove forest if possible along the coastline, or at least in areas where it is possible to grow mangrove forest, right? We discussed what are the big advantages of mangrove forest. They help fight this rise in sea level. They protect us from increased storm or cyclone activity. They help level out this rise in sea levels because they act as an buffer zone and barrier between the sea and the human zones, right? Living zones. So we need to adapt mitigation strategies. We need to adopt of a range of measures, right? We need to update our coastal regulation. We should be stricter with these laws and rules and regulations. We shouldn't be okay, chalta hai attitude will not work at this point of time. So we need to adapt, we need to update, and we need to implement those programs with a sense of urgency. That is what we need to do right now. Now we need to kind of alert coastal communities in advance, right? We need to protect them during severe weather events. Natural and other barriers should be considered. What are natural barriers? Mangrove forests. What are other barriers? You build coastal walls, you build any infrastructure that helps in reducing this increase in sea level, right? You bring in raisable or movable barriers that prevent or help in balancing out, like how Venice is doing, where they have built barriers that help maintain an equilibrium in the waters. Anything goes, but nonetheless we need to adopt those strategies with a sense of urgency. Now the best protection that we can give is we can invest in coastal technologies, right? Both infrastructure and natural, and try to ensure that whatever the developments or whatever the investments that happen in these areas near coastal cities happen a little bit far away from coastlines. Certainly vulnerable areas, you can identify them, you can create zones where large scale construction is not allowed, where human settlement is not allowed. That area can be used for conservation purposes. You can grow mangrove forests with enough resources, with enough commitment, and you should prepare yourself for the worst case scenario. That is how you save human life, that is you save your economy, that is how you protect the environment. So these are the some strategies that we need to adopt with a sense of urgency in at least the most vulnerable areas. Then we can think about adapting large scale plans or models to protect our entire coastline from future sea level rise or any fallout that comes out of climate change. So this is what this article talks about, in the sense that irrespective of what we do, sea levels are going to rise, particularly the 700 million people that are currently living along the coastlines are vulnerable. Particularly, India is at a critical juncture where we need to adopt both natural and other barriers that can protect human settlements along the coastline from severe weather events and rising sea level. The best case scenario for India at this point of time is adoption of climate resilient infrastructure and climate resilient models, like investment models that kind of take all these parameters into consideration before moving and acting in. So moving on to the next article, 50,000 for each COVID death. So on June 30th of this year, Supreme Court came out with a judgment stating that the government must come out with guidelines for giving ex gratia or ex gratia assistance to families of persons who died of COVID-19. Right? This was mandated under the National Disaster Management Act of 2005. Again, the Supreme Court left out the main guidelines to be into the hands of to the government of India, where they suggested that you come out with the guidelines, you come out with the amount that needs to be given as ex gratia payment. Now the Ministry of Home Affairs has informed the Supreme Court that the National Disaster Management Authority has recommended the payment of 50,000 each as ex gratia assistance to the next of the kin of those who died of COVID-19. This includes people who succumbed to the virus while involved in relief operations and preparedness activities. So, we discussed in June what the Supreme Court was saying. The Supreme Court was directing the government, stating that there are these sections, provisions under National Disaster Management Act that states that people should be given ex gratia, or the next of kin should be provided with some sort of financial assistance in this regards. Now we have an answer from the government. So when we were discussing this earlier, we discussed that how it would put or the argument from the government side was that this was going to put an extreme pressure on state finances and central finances, because since most of the financial resources that the government say that the state or central had were being diverted towards fighting COVID-19, asking us to pay ex gratia at this point of time or in the future also is certainly going to put financial stress on the governments of the day. But nonetheless, the Supreme Court held its ground and said that you have to come out with guidelines in regards to this. Now, how are the state government and the central government are going to reimburse or disperse this ex gratia? The states will provide the ex gratia relief from state disaster response funds, and the district disaster management authorities will make this disbursement. Now, states are going to go into their disaster funds, and the district disaster management is going to be the distribution authority for this. Now there is a verification process. The verification process has to go through Aadhaar, and there is a dispute redressal mechanism also. But nonetheless, as of now, 50,000 is going to be disbursed. Largest stockpile of rhino horns were consigned to flames in eastern Assam. So today is World Rhino Day. India is known for its rhinos, particularly the state of Assam is known for its rhinos. They are a protected list. They are protected under Schedule 1 of Indian law. They are in vulnerable list in IUCN. And this is the largest stockpile that was burnt by government authorities in the world. Right? According to wildlife officials, 2,479 of 2,623 horns that were stored in 12 districts of Assam since 1979 were burnt in 6 large iron pyres near Guwahati. So again, they are destroying this to give out a statement to the world, or the people who are smuggling this, who are poaching rhinos, that, or people who still believe in the medicinal benefits of rhino horn, that there is nothing scientific there. This is just a matter of science. The horns are nothing but compacted hair and they have no medicinal value. Now the government of Assam is planning a museum near the Kaziranga National Park where they are trying to display the ashes from this in the form of a rhino. Again, 1305 kg of this rhino horns is being destroyed, while 131 kg is being preserved for scientific reasons. Now let us understand how important rhinos are for our nation. So what is the species of rhinos that are found in Asia, particularly India, is the greater one-horned rhino. In Asian continent, there are 3 species of rhino. One is the greater one-horned rhinoceros, which is found in India. You have the Javan and the Sumatran rhinoceros. Right, as I said, the great one-horned rhino is found in India. It is also known as Indian rhino, and it is the largest of all the rhino species. Now, how do you identify it? It is identified by a single black horn and grey-brown hide with skin folds. Now, they are mostly kind of vegetarian, right? Their diet consists of almost entirely of grass as well as leaves, and they eat shrubs, they eat trees, they eat fruit, and also aquatic plants. Where do you find Indian rhinos? Mainly Assam. Assam is the home for great one-horned Indian rhino, but you find a small amount of population through various programs over the years in West Bengal and also in Uttar Pradesh. Currently, there is an estimated number of 2,640 rhinos in 4 protected areas in Assam, and of the 2,640, 2,400 of them are in Kaziranga National Park and Tiger Reserve. So this is a short amount of information on great one-horned rhino. What is the number? Where are they? What is their diet consists of? And the types of rhinos that you find in Asia. Now, as I said, on the IUCN Red List, they are vulnerable. On the CITES, that is a Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora, they are again listed in Appendix 1, which means that they are threatened with extinction, and there is a prohibition on international trade in specimens of these animals except when it is for non-commercial purpose, that is for scientific research. So where are they listed? In Wildlife Protection Act of 1972 in Schedule 1. Now, has Indian government taken up any initiatives to protect rhinoceros? Yes, we have National Rhino Conservation Strategy, which was launched in 2019, where we intend to fund programs that work towards conserving the greater one-horned rhinoceros. But India Rhino Vision 2020, which was the oldest one, was launched in 2005, where the intent was to attain a wild population of at least 3,000 greater one-horned rhinoceros, which would be spread over 7 protected areas in Assam, right? The idea was by 2020 we are going to increase that number. Sadly, we are still struggling to get that number going, but nonetheless the program has been successful because it also talks about moving rhinos from densely populated parts like Kaziranga to Manas. Manas, though it has rhino population, but the density is very low. Why do you need to move these rhinoceros from one place to other place? Because when you get rhinoceros in a concentrated place, particularly in just 3 areas, when a disease strikes, right, when you have a natural disaster, there is a greater risk that this natural disaster or a disease might decimate the population entirely. So you have high density. What happens during high density? If one infection gets into that group, the entire group gets infected and the decimation of population happens. So in order to prevent that from happening, the Vision 2020 talks about wild to wild relocation of rhinos from densely populated regions to not so densely populated protected areas. Till now we did some 8 to 9 such translocations or wild to wild relocations of rhinoceros, but those 9 instances have been successful, and more are in the offing for the future. Now again, the goal was to reduce the poaching, grow the population of greater 100 rhinos in Assam. There was a streak in 2020 where for 18 to 19 for 13 months or 12 months there wasn't any poaching instance, but in 2020 there was sadly 2 rhinos that were poached by poachers. Now again, Assam has done wonderful work in terms of conserving, in terms of protecting rhinoceros. The Assam government had done a fantastic job of coming up with resources to ensure, but the current scenario is the conflict between poachers and the forest rangers is kind of dangerous, because our forest rangers are not armed. That was being addressed by the Assam government, where they said that they are going to provide us forest rangers with assault rifles so that they too can protect themselves, and not only themselves but also wildlife in a more effective way against armed poachers. So this is a bit about rhinoceros. Today is World Rhinoceros Day, so that is what this article talks about. Thank you. Stay safe. Namaste.
বৰঠাকুৰ IAS একাডেমি, প্ৰস্তুতি আৰু অধ্যয়নৰ নিৰ্ভৰযোগ্য ঠিকনা।
বৰঠাকুৰ IAS একাডেমি।